War II is, I think, the very first scientific war. In other words, science on both sides had played a huge role on how the war came out. And everybody has heard about the quote unquote German scientists, Adolf Hitler and his German scientists. And I think everybody has heard about how those German scientists, or at least many of them, came to America after World War II and sort of immersed themselves into our society. And that's just about all anybody knows about that. They may have heard about it, maybe not. Your book deals with it, I'd say, in great depth.
Yes, it does. The most famous incursion of the Nazis was Project Paperclip, in which perhaps 120 or so German scientists associated with um, essentially rocketry came into the United States and formed the basis of our rocket technology, and really the basis of NASA. And so we've all heard about that, but what we haven't realized or haven't known is that that's probably about 1% of what really happened, and the rest of it is not taught to us. And of course, I like to do that. I like to tell tales that are true, but nobody knows.
And you have done a
Because,
great job, I must say, right now,
oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah,
because
so
you have told all here. And in
yeah,
fact, that
yeah.
there are times when the hair on the back of my neck stood up.
Yeah. Well, if it didn't, then you just weren't reading very carefully, right?
That's right.
So, so yeah, the story, there's the cover. We want to talk about the cover and what that really means, because the cover has flying saucers flying over Washington, D.C., and that is not a fictional picture. That is what really happened in July of 1952. None of the flying saucers landed on the lawn of the White House, but they were, for two different weekends consecutively in July, they were buzzing Washington, the Capitol, and so forth. So much so that that Harry Truman, the president, actually scrambled jets to try to chase them. They were very unsuccessful in chasing the flying saucers. And of course, the evidence, the witnesses. What's interesting, Gary, is that there's quite a few stories that we talk about when we talk about the evidence for flying saucers, UFOs, now known as UAPs. And we look at quite a few different stories. The Roswell story is probably the most prominent one that was featured or occurred in 1947. But one that is even more important is really the Washington Flap that occurred in 1952, because this was witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands, of people. It was seen on radars across the Washington area, the
Aren't there
airports.
pictures to
There are
prove it?
pictures. Yes, in fact, the cover, what I'm showing on the cover is actually you might say, an illustration based on an actual picture that I show in the book, in which the flying saucers are over the Capitol. And so it's, yeah, so I made the book cover a little prettier, but other than that, it's telling the true story. So,
And what a story it is. And by the way, I just have to point out before we continue that Doug, when he writes, he has a style of writing a lot of detail into his manuscripts. And you say, "Oh, no, 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 that's gotta be boring." But not it is not boring, folks. There are lots of details, historical, technical, and otherwise, and yet the book is an easy read. And, I read it just for this conversation, and I found it to be, not only an easy read, but very, very, shall we say, alluring. You wanna turn the page and find out what happened next.
right, right. Well, I try to write the books that I write such a way that there's something that's you sort of say wow on about every page.
Yeah.
Things that, oh, I'd never heard that before. And so that's the level of research I do. And I also have just kind of a sense of what it is that I'm interested in and what it is that I think other people are interested in. And so some of these stories about the UFOs and what really was going on in the 1950s, these are things that the general populace does not really know, and yet it's well documented. And so I felt like it was a good way to start the story of the German invasion into the United States, because it's very likely that those initial flying saucers were actually created by Germans that escaped from World War II and went off into some polar or perhaps the South Pole to create flying saucers. That's a theory, but it's very possible, and there's a lot of historical data to back that up. So that's how I begin the book, because I think that's a good hook to get people interested in the story.
So from then to now, from World War II to now, a jillion things have happened. History has been on fast forward. And but what I find from your book is that you really don't understand history unless you understand the insider's scientific history, post World War II history of America.
Hmm. Yeah, and certainly also the foreign policy and what was going on between 1947 and 1961. Before we came upon the event of the assassination of JFK, there was an incident that older folks in the audience will remember called the Bay of Pigs. That was in 1961, and that was an unsuccessful attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro in Cuba. It is a very deep story. We won't get into that. Just to say that that was organized and funded by the CIA. And the CIA, it was unsuccessful. The CIA got a black eye, but JFK basically took responsibility and took the fall for it. But it's important to understand that that was the culmination of about a dozen years of a guy named Alan Dulles, who was, in effect, one of the first. He was not the first CIA director, but he was the most prominent, and probably still is the most prominent. He had such a huge impact. And the single biggest factor that's important is that Dulles and his team encouraged the, you might say, reclamation of the Nazis, bringing literally thousands of Nazis into the plan to keep Europe from becoming a communist continent. And so the stories really can curl your hair in terms of what they did and how evil they were. And of course, that's what this book is trying to explain, is that the US has an unfortunate history of evil. And it was fomented predominantly by the CIA. We saw that, kind of be accomplished at the assassination. But really, the Vietnam War, again, the CIA was really running that Vietnam War. And most folks don't know that. They assume that the Pentagon was. Well, the Pentagon really wasn't running it. It was really being run by the CIA. And frankly, the CIA has run every war since then.